Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas.
And I'm Suzanne Zargis.
We're bringing you the latest news in Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
Coming up next is In Case You Missed It.
Welcome back. In case you missed it, you may have noticed that we sound a little different each week. That's because we are learning everything about podcasting. And one of the things we've learned is that the space you are in when you are recording makes a big difference in how we sound in the end result.
So when you're recording in a gigantic boardroom, you sound very hollow, like last week. Or when you're recording in this room that we're in right now, you might hear a fan in the background that you have no control over. So we're learning how to use this technology, use this tool, and maybe one day you'll be able to also use it in your classroom. In case you missed it, the latest blog is out and it's talking about where and when to use blogs versus discussion boards. Both tools, they are very different. One of the nice things in the blog for this week is we laid out a nice little chart that you can print off or keep on your desktop to help you decide when to use these tools and how they are similar and how they are different. So go ahead, check it out. If you like it, leave us a comment below. If you've got other ideas, leave those comments below on the blog post too.
In case you missed it, Springfield Public Schools has a Facebook account and a Twitter account. Even if you do not have a personal Facebook or Twitter account, you can catch up on the latest news by looking at our Brightspace district landing page. Right now, I'm looking at the most recent post about 6 students at White Street School who received scholarships to start building their college funding.
That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next, Hot Takes. Welcome back. So this week, our hot takes actually happen to coincide with each other. Both Suzanne and I sent articles out to each other to talk about the same thing. Mine was in reflection of working on future blog posts. So some of the stuff we talk about today, you'll actually read about later on when the blogs come out. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. What my articles were about was all about the SAMR model and connecting it to Bloom's taxonomy. For the longest time, working in the district, all principals have been handing copies out of Bloom's taxonomy, questions that are Bloom's questions that we should be using in the classroom. And then SAMR came along, which was essentially integrating technology into the classroom. So the guy who actually came up with the whole SAMR idea was Dr. Ruben Dario, or I know I'm saying his name wrong, but when he came up with it, it was one of those things where I was like, this makes total sense and how it works. So before we can even talk about anything else, we kind of have to explain what the SAMR model is. And so essentially, the SAMR model is a 4-step, like a ladder, like a little step stool. And it's all about integrating technology in. So the first one, the very bottom step, is the substitution, which is that tech acts as a direct tool substitute with no functional change. The next step is augmentation, which tech acts as a direct tool substitute with functional improvements. And we're going to talk about what these kind of look like throughout our whole hot takes time. And then the next part of the ladder is above, I like to think of it as above the equator. It's like moving up north. Is the modification, which is significant task redesign. And then the redefinition, which is taking a current task redefining it, making it something that wouldn't have been possible even 5 years ago with the technology we have in the district.
So, Mike, just to clarify, we've been using this acronym SAMR. People who are not familiar with that might be thinking, gee, SAMR, SAMIR, SAMMER, totally not making that connection. Mm-hmm. So to clarify, SAMR, SAMR, S for substitution, A for augmentation, M for modification, and R for redefinition.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to. Fairly understandable words, I hope. Words that are common in our language to begin with. It's not like we're using Greek words or, like those Latin derivatives of words that we sort of know what they mean and we say them and we think we know what they mean. These ones we actually do know what they mean. Substitution, pretty straightforward. Augmentation means to augment something, to change something. And if you're in elementary or late middle or early middle, you may have read the book Wonder, and they talk about how there's facial augmentation in that book. Modification, that's like going and like making a change to a car, like a mod. I'm going to modify. I think of my 4-year-old's, one of his favorite shows is Tokyo Mater from like Mater's Tall Tales on Netflix. And in that, he jokes about this old tow truck getting modified with new rims and new paint job and a hood, because he didn't have a hood before. And so that's like modification, is changing what it looks like. And then redefinition is redefining the entire task.
So those last two that you mentioned, the modification and the redefinition, it almost sounds like Transformers.
Ah, yes. Transformers.
So in the visual for the SAMR model, the first two steps, substitution and augmentation, are basically enhancements of your lessons, whereas modification and redefinition are transformations of your lessons.
Yeah, and what I like about this model is whether you are a tech-savvy person, someone who uses technology in their classroom all the time, or someone who is very tech-averse and not wanting to use it, there are ways to be on different levels, and different assignments don't have to... It's not like every assignment needs to be a redefinition, which I think is kind of important to think about, because when we think of Bloom's taxonomy, and this is where these kind of come together, is with Bloom's, you're always trying to get to the top of the pyramid, which it's escaping me right now. What's at the top of the pyramid? That would be like the create and the evaluate. And so we're always constantly trying to get students to that point. Well, with SAMR, some of the things that we do, or that you would do in the classroom, you know what, maybe all it is a substitution. One of the things we'll talk about is just a few different ways that SAMR can be applied to any particular type of assignment. And so I think it's something that we all can kind of grasp onto. It's something that we can all use in our daily classroom, but it does take a little bit of planning.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there are people listening who are still just either overwhelmed or confused with the whole concept of what SAMR is. And just as when you're teaching any of the primary grades, or really any grade, it helps to give an example, right? To make things more clear, make things more tangible in understanding what this SAMR model is.
So I've got a great one to start with trying to understand SAMR. One of the things that most people jump to when they try to explain SAMR is actually doing a writing assignment. Because in the past, a writing assignment would be done in a notebook with a pencil, which is technology. It is a tool that has been created for a purpose. And our purpose in the classroom with it is to write a short story. So in thinking of using that example, that being the original task, if I were to go through and apply each step on SAMR, maybe the first one, the substitution step, would be use Microsoft Word and have them type it up. Boom. You just got on the first step.
Sounds easy enough to
technology. Next would be augmentation. Again, use the word processor. You type it up, but then you use it to either help you with the editing, with the grammar. Microsoft 2016, the Word in that, they actually have like suggestions now. It gets kind of annoying when you're writing, because if you're writing with your own voice and that's kind of how you're using it, it's trying to make corrections for you so that you have more concise language. Or you can even augment by, instead of typing it up, you can speak it to the computer. So in Microsoft Word or in OneNote, that would be another tool that you can use to talk to the computer, and it will type up what you say. So that would be augmentation. That's the second step. As for a teacher's role in those first two steps, very, very little. Because all it is taking the computer that the students have and starting to work with it. Now comes the trickier part, which is getting up over that equator line. With modification, again, you go back to using the word processor and the text-to-speech function, but instead of just creating a piece of writing, it's posted somewhere where students can respond to other students. And again, if you're thinking about how it's different than being the handwritten one you'd sit with a partner to meet with, and you would read each other's papers. You'd offer concise feedback to help them make it better. Here, by sharing it to like a discussion board, or if you use the blog tool, you can share it there, and then anybody can make comments. And depending on how much protections are on your blog, if you're using the Brightspace blog or something else, maybe it's a public blog that other people can make comments on, and you can ask for suggestions and feedback to improve your writing.
So it immediately opens up this child's world to more than just one person in their classroom.
Right.
They could, in an instant, get feedback from everyone in the class, or from students, depending on how you post it, from students in a different classroom within your school, or from students across the district, or in another town.
Or across the world. I mean, the possibilities are really endless when you are getting to that point. And so the last step is the redefinition. So instead of this writing assignment, maybe you still have them do the writing part. Maybe you have them type it up, or maybe it's handwritten notes. But then they take that and they turn it into a PowerPoint, into a sway, into using Powtoons and creating a little cartoon with it. Some way to retell that story that they're writing differently. Which I think, again, that takes a little bit of time, because you want the students to not spend so much time learning how to use the tools that they're trying to use. So there is a little bit of teaching that needs to go into that. But even that, most of that teaching is, here, I've written a story, or this is how I would approach it, I would say. I've written a story, and I want you to now take my story and use this program, and I want you to create visuals to go with it, so that they get the idea of how to use the tool without having to also come up with the story part, so that when they go to do the story part for themselves, they already know how to use the tool. So it's just a little way that I would do it. I mean, there's lots of ways that you could teach this part.
Right. So basically what you're saying is you're not going to go straight from substitution to redefinition in a week's time or a month's time.
Yeah, I mean, the more I read about it for preparing for the blog post, the more I saw that redefinition is not the end goal. There is no goal line, I think, is the bigger thing that I came out of it. And I think that actually spoke into some of the articles that you shared with me too, is that with the whole SAMR idea, it's not about getting to the top of the ladder and staying there. It's about making improvements and improving your own skills, which I think it's a whole different mindset, because a lot of times we're focused on the end result, the end, when it's really about what process are we using to get there, and can we use that process somewhere else. Exactly.
There's so many points that you made that I want to key in on, and the fact that it's automatic for so many teachers, I think, to focus on that end result and to focus, if not on perfection, but on being as close to perfection as we possibly can. And that's impossible, right? So it's not a matter of getting to that redefinition all the time and staying there all the time. I did see many different visuals of the SAMR model, and one of them that I liked was more of a swimming pool. So instead of a ladder that you're climbing up to get to the top, it was a swimming pool, and you might swim to the end and come back and then only make it halfway the next time and then come back. So it's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, that swimming pool image, that is a good one, because again, it gets to the point that it's not about the reaching the end of the pool. It's about being able to play in the pool. And most people, they're either doing laps in the pool, which is going up and back, up and back, up and back. Those people are amazing. They can sit there and they can do that for 45 minutes to an hour. I can do it for about 3 myself before I'm like, I'm bored, I'm going to go jump off of things. But for the SAMR, it's all about like playing around. Maybe I'm going to hang out in the deep end for a while, and then I'm going to go to the shallow end and play some volleyball.
Right.
So that is great. There's one other example before we jump into some of these other articles that we looked at that I absolutely loved. And mostly because I'm like, well, I was thinking as I was reading this, I'm like, this is great for our subjects where we're always in the classroom, where like the reading, writing, math, social studies, science, art. I'm like, but what about like shop or phys ed? And one of the examples that's when you go and read the blog in a few weeks when it's out was this phys ed lesson. So the lesson was learning how to hit a baseball by watching and listening to a coach or a phys ed teacher show you, and then you do it yourself. So I'm like, all right, I know that one. I think I related to it because I played baseball for many years. So the quick through it is for substitution. Instead of the coach doing it, there's a video. So like maybe using YouTube. For augmentation, there is the video, again, to train how to do it, with links to other training content from other coaches. So again, you're starting to pull in more people into that student's world and trying to teach them. Modification is where I start to like, I'm starting to see how we can use technology in gym class, which is the coach or the teacher videos the training exercise and then flips the lesson, having students watch it as homework and using class time to practice and reinforce technique. That's the flipped classroom model completely. Now, the redefinition that they give as an example is the students watch the examples, they practice the technique, then the coach or the teacher videotapes them doing it, and then they can provide each other with feedback and tips on how to improve their technique. And that one, it's funny to see that pop up on this list because when I played baseball, that was one of the things that we actually did. And so like whether my coach knew it or not, this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were actually doing this redefinition because not every day in Vermont is a sunny day. Not every day is a non-wet rainy day. And so sometimes we'd have to hit in the cages inside. And so we would have to do that. And you don't field in the cages. So everybody else was standing around. So the coach had thought, instead of standing around, I'm going to get a bunch of TVs. We're going to put a bunch of VHS tapes in because this was back before there was digital. And so we all had our own VHS tapes of the coach recording us during practices so that we can then help each other with our techniques. And I'm like, that is how you do technology in a gym class.
I love it. What that says to me immediately is, how do so many people learn? Is it just by listening and reading and reading how you should hit a ball or how you should catch a ball or whatever the sport may be. Is that how everyone learns? No. Some people, a lot of people, learn by doing and learn by watching, which is exactly what you just described. So we just need to transfer that, which was automatic in sports so long ago, to every other subject today.
And I think the more we learn and the more we practice with all these tools that we have at our disposal, I think it'll become more and more second nature. One of the articles that you had brought up was about somewhere, I don't remember which one it is now, but they talked about how teachers are going into college with the knowledge of social media, but not necessarily how to use technology in a way to help further education.
Right.
And I think we even see that as elementary teachers, as middle school teachers, as high school teachers. We see that same thing where students, we think that they're tech savvy. We think that they understand more than we do. They probably do, but most of their life focus is on video games. Most of it is on social media, the Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, XYZ. I would say Vine, but Vine died last year, so that one doesn't work anymore. But like that's where the younger generation, I can say younger generations because I'm older now, the younger generations are coming from, is that's how they view technology, as a social media tool.
Right, that's right. The article, Mike, was from usnews.com, and the title is College Struggle to Blend Tech, Teacher Training, Lesson Plans. So again, just as you said, younger people may know technology when it comes to social media, but they don't know and are not being taught enough how to use that technology in the classroom effectively.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, even as I was looking up information, there's not a lot of lesson plans out there, because a lot of times you can find hundreds of lesson plans on any subject. But as for integrating technology into those subjects, integrating the SAMR model, there's not many lessons out there. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're starting to see a slow trickle of ideas that can be applied and lesson plans that can be used. And I know that with the interviews we have coming up later, they actually talk about how they've slowly integrated technology into the classroom, which I think is fantastic.
Right. It's not an easy process. I mean, obviously the content is key, and that's where the college's focus is, the content and the pedagogy. But they understand they need to change. They need to include more courses in helping these young teachers understand exactly what they need to do to incorporate technology. But it's a huge undertaking. Some schools are just working individually with their own teachers. But I think it's an area that definitely needs to improve over time, and we're open to any and all ideas that maybe our teachers in Springfield have, mm-hmm. and any steps that we could take that can help our teachers, let us know.
In reading this article, it reminded me back of when I was in college, which was in the mid-2000s. We had the option to create our portfolio, which was what we needed to use to get our initial license. We had to take a couple of tests, but we also had to create a very extensive portfolio, and then that portfolio was supposed to also help us get jobs later on. And so my school had just started to teach how to use Microsoft Word to create a digital portfolio. So I went into interviews with a fancy-looking case, because I took one of those slimline cases. I put my own little picture of me and a logo on the top and my disc on the inside, and I would bring it in when they say as we're like exchanging pleasantries, and here's my portfolio, and they look at it like I've gone crazy. Like I just given them like Kenny G or something.
That doesn't surprise me after reading this article, because that's exactly what they said. Even teachers interviewing for new jobs, just as you described, the people hiring were not concentrating on a person's ability to integrate technology. They wanted to see how that person could teach a classroom and whether or not they knew the content, and not so much if they could use the technology tools.
Yeah, I know with the 21st century standards that we have now, the problem-solving standards, the collaborating standards, a lot of that is hard to do. It's hard to quantify, and that's where technology can come in and assist with that, because there are ways to work together in that. One of the other things from this article that really jumped out at me, and like you were saying, it makes total sense, is that pedagogy and content is king. Like, you need to know your stuff to become a teacher. At the time that this article was written, and even probably now in many school districts, it doesn't matter if you can use an iPad to do X, Y, and Z. They want to know that you know what the content is. But I think what's missing in that whole thinking is you need to know how to differentiate instruction to a student, to a class of students, where it's more individualized learning. And I think that's where being able to use the technology can help. Just because there's an app out there that's great doesn't mean it should be used.
Right.
In all cases.
That was a definite point that I picked up on in the article, that there are so many apps out there, and there are some people that just keep getting one app after another, and they think that they're doing a fine job in integrating technology. But the key is really understanding why you're using that particular technology, and are you choosing the right time to use it with the right students?
Yeah. And I know that as a district, we keep continuing to move forward with technology and integrating it into the classroom. And we do have to sometimes step back and say, is this worth it? Is what we're doing worth it? Is this app? Is this program? Am I doing something that is enhancing my students' time? When I look at my content and I look at my pedagogy, like, is my technology hampering it, or is it extending what we're doing already?
Right. So it goes deeper than looking at your lesson and then thinking, okay, so what technology can I find now to put in the middle of this lesson? You really have to understand what that particular program or app is written for, and how it's going to help your students achieve what you originally planned for them.
Yeah.
I know it's very easy for so many teachers to just feel overwhelmed with all the different technologies that are out there, all the different apps, all the different tools. And another key point I found in that article was that teachers should not expect quick mastery of all of this new technology. It's very important that you give yourself time and be patient. It's a process. No one expects someone to know it all in a very short amount of time. You've got to take baby steps, try one thing, do it effectively, and then next time try something new. But definitely take it slow. What I love about having the job that I have right now in this time is to be able to step back and think, wow, we are really transforming education. And as frustrating and overwhelming as I know it is for so many teachers and administrators out there, it's just fascinating to watch. And I know 20 years from now, 50 years from now, I'll look back smiling, saying I was part of that huge, huge undertaking, and I was in the middle of it.
Sometimes it's hard to think that far forward because I know as teachers we're constantly thinking about the 20 kids in front of us right now, or the 15 or the 25 or the 28 students in front of us, being like, I have to get them to the future. I can't even get them to tie their own shoes. I can't get them to be nice to each other. And so I think part of what our job really is to help teachers like bear some of this load and take some of the challenges out. And I think that's where like having what we're doing with the podcast, what we're doing with the blog, what we're doing on Brightspace, what we are helping to do with training everybody that is willing to listen to us. So if you're out there and you're a principal listening, call us. We would love to come to your school and do something to help lessen the load for your teachers in using technology in the classroom. Teachers, tell your principal to contact DLA support and say, hey, we need some training on this. Do you think you could come out, or we could do a Skype or something? Because that's where our hearts are. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Right. I went to a conference recently, and the keynote speaker there, who did fabulous things in his school district out in California, had a phrase that he said again and again, and it was something to the effect of, don't think outside the box. There is no box. And I just loved that. There is no box. We need to think of new and different ways that we can provide the necessary training, that teachers can teach each other, that people across the district can collaborate. We've got some great PLC courses now in Brightspace, which I'm very excited about. I know Brendan has been offering some Skype sessions for MCAS questions and training. And here we are doing the podcast. So we're trying new things, and we will continue to try new things to help you absolutely as much as we can.
Yeah. So some of the other articles, there was one thing in one of them that really kind of jumped out at me. That I was like, I don't agree with you. And it's this idea of multitasking. It came up in one of the articles that we have to start training people to multitask. And I don't believe there is a such thing as multitasking, and there's plenty of research to support it. I think the quote from the article on Edutopia is, we have to multitask, connect beyond the workday, and collaborate and connect both locally and globally. There are studies out there by people much, much smarter than myself, including MIT professors who have done studies on the brain who show that there's no such thing as multitasking. There's multi-switching, and that's what we're really good at, is being able to switch back and forth between task and task. And so when I read this, I was like, all right, the first part of the article was talking about doing literacy and technology, and then it gets to this point, and I'm just like,
Mike, I understand where you're coming from, because I just recently read an article about multitasking and how there is no such thing. So I completely understand your frustration with that. But I think where this author was coming from was, I just immediately thought of any classroom teacher where you've got, especially in the younger grades, students who need their shoes tied, who need to go to the restroom, who forgot their homework, who need to run down to the lunchroom because they forgot their lunchbox, someone who needs a pencil, someone who can't find the book that they need, someone who's having an argument with another student. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And in the meantime, the teacher needs to take attendance and needs to get the lesson ready and needs to get the smartboard operating and needs to talk to a parent. All of that.
Essentially, they have a lot of stuff to do in the classroom.
Yes. I think that's what this author was talking about. But what I did like about what she said was that technology is more than something that simply distracts a lot of our children. I think there's a lot of differing views on the benefits of technology, and I oftentimes hear all the negatives, specifically with the phones and other devices for video games or whatnot. And there are people who have a very difficult time seeing any positive with technology. And this author tried to negate that and spin it to there are definite positives, and we need to be open to the fact that we need to prepare our students for the world that they live in now and that they will live in 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the quote right before that one was actually one that I highlighted. I was like, yeah, I highlighted and underlined. I'm like, this is a good quote, which was, the contemporary job market requires us to adapt, continually learn, and apply various skill sets in many directions, which I think it goes along with what you're talking about, and how in the article they were talking about how to essentially balance technology and teaching together. And there was some really good ways that the author, Andrew Marcinek, states. And as I was reading those really good ways, I'm like, oh, we have those tools. I'm like, that's Brightspace. That's Microsoft Office 365.
Right. There are a lot that we already have, and I think it's important to remember that integrating technology doesn't have to consume your life as an educator. Mm-hmm. Again, going back to just try one thing. This author particularly says, ignore the clutter of overzealous EdTech enthusiasts and find your focus to design your own instruction. Don't feel like you have to do everything your neighbor's doing, everything your co-teacher is doing. Find something that you're comfortable with, that you're willing to try, and do that, and that's enough.
Yeah, and this author even reiterates the other article, which was not about learn how to use all the apps, because all the apps are great, but like use ones that are part of your good instructional design that integrate in to your work and not distract from it. Another thing that they mention is that it's all about the opportunities in teaching. Last week we were talking about how as teachers we create experiences for the students. The app would be a part of that. Does that app help or hinder? Does using Brightspace to have a discussion help or hinder? For a teacher trying to keep their work organized, does using OneDrive help or hinder? And it comes back to, what are you doing in the first place? And I think that's like what you're saying is, pick one thing and start with that. And again, that comes up in our interviews later on today too. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important to remember and think about.
I do want to give one more example, Mike, in the article that you had from emergingtech.com. Another example that they gave of the SAMR model had to do with understanding Shakespeare. I know some people will be mad at me for saying this. I do not like Shakespeare. Why do I not like Shakespeare? Because all I did was read the story and analyze it in my classroom. And I never really got it. I didn't get it. I read it. I did what I was supposed to do. I took the test. I passed. I got an A. But I don't like Shakespeare. When I looked at this example for SAMR, substitution, read Shakespeare text online. Okay, that's okay.
Ebook.
Augmentation, use online dictionaries, study guides, history sites to supplement reading. I could have benefited from that. I had a very difficult time with Shakespeare language. Modification, use multimedia resources like text, audio, and video tools to jointly construct knowledge, learning, and understanding of a portion of a play or a character as a group project. That alone could have helped me tremendously in understanding Shakespeare.
Yeah, collaboration is always key, and I think we undervalue that a lot. Is like when students are working together, if they're truly working together and not goofing off in the corner, then they will gain a greater understanding.
Absolutely.
So
and they'll remember
I can see
it.
that. I can see that, taking like Othello and sitting down with a group being like, man, this O guy is crazy.
a shift and a change for teachers from delivering content to facilitating collaboration and learning. But in my opinion, it's definitely worth that frustration and uneasiness to see the students get excited about what they're learning, and more important than that, remembering what they're learning and being enthusiastic to pass that knowledge on to somebody else.
Yeah. So you got through the first three. What's the fourth one for redefinition?
So redefinition of our Shakespeare assignment here. Answer the question, what did the culture of the time have on the writing of Shakespeare's plays? Using a concept mapping tool and constructing a mind map demonstrating key elements through words and images. Sounds pretty complicated. Sounds like something never even imagined. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a transformed part of the lesson.
Yeah, I can see how, especially like researching and developing that mind map of looking at what it was like living in Shakespeare's time and then applying that to the stories themselves, because we do that with all sorts of reading that we do. I think of like all the dystopian novels that I love to read, or reading Harry Potter, which I will go on and on and on for. We could do a whole podcast all about Harry Potter, but that's not what we're going to hear for. But just being able to move into like what it was like back then, or what it might be like in the future. And so I think that's a fantastic assignment. Now, doing a concept map, I've never done one, and so I would definitely have to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think once I understood how to do that, as a teacher, I could turn around and show students how to do it.
Right.
And then they could take what little I show and then take it and make it their own.
Sounds like a plan. I think the key, again, is taking it slow, and for a teacher not to feel like they have to do everything all at once, but try a little bit at a time and work with your colleagues.
And as educators, we're ultimately not preparing the students for our future. We're preparing for their future, which I think is something also that's important to point out, is in the future, we have no idea what it's going to look like. We already reached 2016, which I believe is the year from Back to the Future, when they go to the future and Marty's on the hoverboard. And
well, we've had hoverboards.
And the self-tying shoes, self-tying Nikes did come out. So yeah, it was last year. Last year was when Back to the Future actually became the future.
So if we could
and the Cubs won the World Series. So
if we could just convert trash into gasoline or a form of energy for transportation,
yeah,
we'd be golden.
We'd be golden. So get your students on that, especially the students who are very engineer-minded. So to kind of wrap up today, one of the last articles we have is 10 ways to reach SAMR redefinition level and different tools that you can use for it. There were some pretty cool ones that were based a lot around project-based learning. Instead of having like a test to do, like you create a project with other people. My favorite one that came up on this list, I highlighted most of them as like, oh, I would totally do this if I was teaching still. But sketchnoting. The idea, because I've watched some of these videos. If you look up Ken Robinson, Dr. Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson, someone did a sketchnoting of like a portion of one of his talks. And it's wicked cool because like you hear the person talking and then you see the artist like sketching it out and drawing it as he's talking. So it's like, it's not quite animation. It's all like recording someone doing all the drawing and then speeding the drawing up as the person's talking.
I love that. I mean, it's been researched and documented how it's so valuable for people to write, to remember. It's more than just reading and listening. Yeah. They need to write it down in order to remember. I know that's important for me.
Yeah, and another one on here that I actually did when I was teaching last year, one of the options that popped up was Twitter writing. And what we did was we called it twaikus, and we wrote haikus that had to fit the guidelines of Twitter. And then what I did as a 5th grade teacher is I got blue large paper outside my classroom on the walls, so going from the ceiling down, and then as students completed their twikus, we printed them up on little white sheets. They had the little logo, the little bird for Twitter, and we taped it out there, and we just kept the roll going. And so we ended up, I think I ended up with I taught 35 students last year, and I think I ended up with 42 twikus. Some of them were absolutely hilarious. Some of them were a little sad, because that's just I think it was just that particular time of day. But it was one of those things where the students were like, wait a minute, we're going to use Twitter in the classroom? I'm like, almost. Because it was 5th grade and we didn't have all the permissions, we weren't going to go ahead and create a Twitter account to do this. But I think if I was teaching middle school or high school, maybe that would be part of the assignments, is that they would get typed up and tossed onto Twitter, and then we'd see what happens. Which I'm like, this is like one step above like what I did, which I thought was pretty cool.
That was definitely one of my favorite examples as well. And this example, along with several others, are on the website ditchthattextbook.com. Feel free to go there for a number of fabulous examples, including Aid the Community, ebook authors, a cultural exchange.
Oh, the community one. That was another one that really jumped out at me, because I think with problem-based learning, it's all about taking real problems. We live in a community. We live in Springfield. We live in Western Mass. We live in Massachusetts. We live in the U.S. There are plenty of problems all around this country that, as a teacher, you could assign that problem and see what happens when the students try to tackle it. And that would be a way to see all those higher order thinking skills that we're looking for when we are teaching and when we're working with the students. And so I loved that one.
Again, and it brings it all back to what is going to be applicable to the students. What do they care about? What do they want to do in this world? I think so many times we underestimate the abilities of young children, and they have fabulous ideas. They can easily think that there is no box, that they can think outside the box. There is no box. I think we need to just get on board with their energy.
Yeah, we need to start helping them get outside the box and create their own learning. We are way over on time today.
Well, as you know, Mike, I get excited about education, and I can go on and on and on.
So, we're wrapping up our hot takes. Is there any last points you want to make before we sign off and move to our interviews?
I think that's it. I'm very excited about the interviews coming up. The people that are in this interview presented at our Technology Symposium on March 3rd. And they're just wonderful examples of teachers who started out being overwhelmed, but then saw what was possible and started taking small steps forward and are now very enthusiastic and willing to teach others.
All right, so first, can we start with your name, role, school, and what you are presenting on today?
Sure. My name is Erin O'Brien. I work at Kensington International School. I teach 3rd grade, and I'm also the technology coordinator. And Katie and I are presenting on discussion threads for Brightspace.
My name is Katie Barthelette. I also teach at Kensington. I teach 4th grade, and I'm going to be working with Erin on discussions.
I'm Sara Wright. I work at Walsh Elementary School. I also teach 3rd grade, and I'm working with Erin and Katie on Brightspace, specifically using the news feed.
So why did you guys want to come and present today?
I wanted to come present today because I feel like Brightspace has so many different tools that a lot of teachers don't know about and would really like to use in their classroom if they had more information about it.
I wanted to present today to help teachers of all technology abilities see that they can do it and to give them the confidence and the skills that they need in order to be successful in the classroom.
And I wanted to present today because when I got the initial Brightspace training, I felt like I wanted more ideas from real teachers of how they were implementing these things in their classrooms. So hopefully that's something we can provide to our participants.
Well, thank you for that. So today, what are you hoping that the participants get out of the discussion threads and the news feeds?
I really want them to be able to increase their student engagement, and I think both of the news and the discussion threads will help them do that. So I want their lessons to be enhanced with technology and more engaging.
I hope that when they go back to their classrooms, they'll feel more confident using Brightspace, and I hope that it's useful for them so that they are able to come up with lessons that are going to be engaging for their students.
I agree. I was hoping that our participants would be able to make their lessons more engaging and their students able to be more independent on the computers.
So when you guys first, since you're presenting on Brightspace, when it was first presented to you, how did that feel?
Not good. I saw it as something that was entirely overwhelming, and I don't think it was explained thoroughly to teachers, and I think that was for the first year. I went through it myself. I don't think I had a full understanding of it at all. And I thought I only saw it as an assessment tool, and I wanted to learn more about it because I knew it had the ability to do more than assessments. And it wasn't until this year where I got a 2-day training on Brightspace where I really felt like, wow, there's so much more you can do with it.
Yeah, I agree with Erin. Last year I just used it for assessments, and I didn't even know that there was tools that I could create my own assessments, never mind the discussion and the Dropbox. So up until this year, when I went to the training with Erin, the 2-day training, I only used it for assessments, and I feel as though teachers in Springfield still just use it for assessments, and there's so much more to it.
Yeah, I felt almost intimidated by it because I knew that we were using it for assessments, but that there was other things there, and I felt like I was kind of on my own in finding what was there and how to use it. So until this year when I got a 2-day training and got introduced to what else was there, then I still felt like I was looking for real-life application in an elementary classroom.
Since you guys went to a Brightspace training with Brightspace trainers, after you left that, was there one tool when you got back to the classroom you're like, yes, I have to use this tool? Mm-hmm. And what was it? And has it worked so far?
One tool that I really like using in 4th grade is the Dropbox. Writing is really important in 4th grade, and especially this year we're using a lot with technology because of MCAS being on the computer. So a lot of times my students will type an essay, and I would have to find a way to have them either email it to me or walk around to everyone's computer to grade it. And now with the Dropbox, they can just log on to Brightspace and Dropbox their entire document, and it's much easier for me to be able to see everybody's at the same time.
I was really excited about the checklist and restriction options because when I went to the training, I learned how to create a checklist, and the students can finish work, and then if they choose something on the checklist, they're then brought somewhere else because of the restrictions that I created. So it individualizes instruction, and it also provides enrichment for those students who need more, and also more for the students who need or who are below level that need that extra push. So I thought that was a great way to individualize. So fun.
I was super excited about the news, which is kind of why I'm presenting it today. I thought it was a great way to engage the students right away when they're coming into class, and a great place that's easily accessible for students to get to all the other cool things that we have in our district, like the Discovery Ed and the Padlet, and it just kind of gives them an easy place to go and access these things. So it made it a lot more user-friendly for kind of the younger students.
So looking back now that you guys have struggled through and then had some training with Brightspace, how would you encourage teachers who haven't had that training and are struggling with it right now?
I would say to pick one tool in particular and focus on that, because I think a part of the challenges in Springfield is that we have initiative-itis, and there's like 1,000,001 initiatives coming out, and that really overwhelms teachers. So if they focus on one tool and try experimenting with it and rolling that out and becoming comfortable with that, that will increase their confidence. So then after they do that, they can go on to the next one. But start small.
I totally agree, and I think collaborate and share ideas and build things together really helps. Talking with other teachers, even if it's from someone from another school, just to get ideas, because part of the barrier is even thinking of ideas of way to implement it. So collaboration, I think, is key.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right, so let's take a step back from Brightspace. With all the other tools that the district has, since you just mentioned initiative, I can't even say it right now.
It was really
what are some of the other tools that have come out through the district that you're like, yes, this is awesome, or like, I'm glad that they've showed us how to use this?
Discovery Ed.
Discovery.
Yeah,
Sure.
Discovery Ed.
I presented on that at the last symposium, and the teachers that I was working with were so, I really felt they were inspired by it, because they could really see how technology can change instruction. And that was the first program that I saw teachers really having those aha moments. It's changing everything. That was definitely one program for me.
I would agree. I think Discovery Ed has been great for the kids in an engaging way. They're excited to respond, which is hard to do in at least our school, I think. Mm-hmm. They respond to the things on Discovery Ed. They're excited to go and check things out and explore on their own or explore what I've given them. I like how it can be teacher controlled. It's a really cool thing.
All right. So we've been focused on the teacher side of this. How about the students? How have they responded? How has it been implementing Brightspace or Discovery Ed or Padlet or Office 365? Any of these tools, like how has it been with the students themselves in the implementation?
My students love it because it lets them be more independent. I can post things on Brightspace, and then they're given a choice of what they want to do, and they really like the independence.
I agree, just to piggyback. I think what's so neat about all these tools that the district is providing is that there's so many of them. So what I like to do in my classroom is I teach many of the different tools, like different presentation tools, for example. And once the students are confident with each one, for an end-of-unit assessment, I give them the choice to choose one of those presentation tools, like PowerPoint or Board Builder, one of those. And the fact that they have the skills and the confidence to use any one of those, it makes it way more engaging for them, and they're just more proud of their work. They love it.
I would agree. They seem really proud to be able to come in every morning and get signed on and read their message and decide what they're going to do and go follow that link or talk to their friends through discussion board. I think it's giving them an opportunity to do things that they want to be doing anyway. Like they like communicating with their friends online, and they like creating things that look cool or animated. I think that they're super engaged. They're excited about it. Makes it easier to have them come to school every day.
How much time have you invested in learning how to use the different tools in Brightspace?
A lot.
Yeah, I think after the training still, the training gave us so much information, but it's not until you sit down and play with it and spend time with your thinking about how you can use it in your own classroom that really is beneficial. So,
and I think just education in general is constantly changing. And for us as educators, we should be spending a lot of time making sure that we are learning the technology tools, because we're trying to get our students to become 21st century learners. And if we don't have the skills to get them there, how are they going to get there?
Yeah, I would say that I've even added like a whole nother component to my lesson planning, that I'm not just creating lesson plans of the content that I want to deliver, but also how the students would be able to engage themselves on the computer. So it's adding a little bit more time on my planning, but it's definitely paying off and keeping the students engaged.
So we're almost out of time. Is there one thing that you want to leave teachers in this district with? Is there a word of wisdom or yay, you can do this type thing that you want to leave behind?
I think that what Katie said earlier about just trying one thing and trying to reach out to people, playing with it for a little while, even getting your kids on to see what they can do with it. Part of our the way I rolled it out in my classroom was just going on and having the kids explore, and I kind of noticed what they were into, and I could use that in my own lessons. So I like the idea of trying one thing and talking to other teachers and reaching out and coming to things like this.
I think just give it a try.
Yeah.
Everyone, no matter how familiar you are with technology, everyone can do something. And I know it could be scary, but you will almost instantly see the benefits of it.
Yeah, and I think just reaching out to your colleagues, because everyone has strengths, and I think there's a lot of people in this district that are willing to help if you're asking for it.
Knowing that there are a lot of teachers out there who are so worried about using technology because it doesn't always work perfectly the first time or maybe the second time, what advice do you have for those teachers? How do you react when you've got a lesson plan in place and then something doesn't work the way you expect it to?
I would say first, take a deep breath. But I find that if I practice it at home and try to troubleshoot before I go into a lesson with the technology, that helps, because then when you're on the spot, it's easier to fix the problem. But when you're first starting off, I would say have a plan B.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
The more familiar you become, you'll be able to problem solve. But it's okay if it doesn't work the first time.
I agree. I'd say that it absolutely does happen, and it's a good time to teach the kids that things like that happen, and that they'll reach frustrations, and show them that we can plan on a plan B and have a plan B, and then we can problem solve. We can figure things out. So I've actually involved them in the process of, okay, what's the problem here, and how can we solve this through technology? And they get into it. They think they know a lot more than I do. They probably do.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time to stop in and checking out our podcast, and hopefully this will inspire other teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we thank Katie Barthelette, Sara Wright, and Erin O'Brien for their time in the interview. There was a lot of great stuff in there, especially going back to thinking about taking one thing at a time and trying one thing at a time. I think for all of them, that's kind of what they did, and then they just, once they got that one thing down, they went to the next one, and then the next one. And so when we interview them again, which might happen in the future, maybe we'll hear more about how they've grown using technology over time. Today's question of the week comes to you based upon what we were talking about with the SAMR model and using technology in the classroom. And that question is, what are some ways that you have used technology in your classroom to make your classroom more effective? Please email us at dlasupport@springfieldpublicschools.com. Once we start to get more responses, we'll add them right here afterwards. We'll review last week's question with some of your answers, and then we'll ask the next one, and we'll continue that process going. You're going to be able to check us out very soon on iTunes and Stitcher and your favorite podcast platform. As for right now, we're still available to listen to through the WeLearn page on my SPS. So check us out. You can subscribe that way. It goes straight to your email whenever new posts are posted. That's it for this week. I'm Mike Thomas.
I'm Suzanne Zargis.
We'll see you next week.